Now, Abhijit Banerjee delves into the paradox of India's economic growth alongside widespread poverty, questioning who is really getting richer. Abhijit Banerjee explains his skepticism about GDP numbers. Banerjee discusses the paradox of India being a large economy with a poor population. He clarifies that despite economic size, per capita income is lower due to population growth. Banerjee questions whether the country as a whole is getting richer or poorer. He emphasizes that wealth distribution is uneven, with some becoming very rich while others remain poor. Banerjee concludes by addressing why the rich are getting richer in India. Banerjee mentions using a pressure cooker analogy for explaining Indian economics. Abhijit Banerjee discusses global products like iPhones or Prada, noting their low production costs. He explains that the high value comes from intellectual property, making these products scalable and profitable. Abhijit Banerjee discusses their 2019 book Argument about increasing returns due to technology. Banerjee explains how those with access to high-demand technologies will become extremely wealthy while others struggle. Banerjee notes how coding jobs are increasingly automated, leading to the disappearance of well-paid positions in India. The income distribution data shows a widening gap between the rich and others due to these technological changes. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the challenges in measuring wealth among the rich. He notes that the middle class is actually losing ground compared to the poor. Banerjee suggests inequality may appear to be falling due to lack of data on the wealthy. Banerjee concludes by questioning if middle class individuals feel poorer due to a scarcity of good jobs. Banerjee discusses the challenges in fixing job displacement due to AI, noting that many service industry jobs are at risk. Banerjee expresses pessimism about certain high-skilled jobs like accounting and animation being replaced by AI. Banerjee explains the income range for what he considers middle class in India from 30,000 to 3 lakh rupees per month. Banerjee confirms that middle class salaries between 30,000 and 3 lakh rupees have remained stagnant for 2 to 3 decades. He notes that in real terms, these salaries are actually decreasing due to inflation over the past decade. Abhijit Banerjee discusses how CEO salaries have increased while middle class wages have stagnated and possibly declined. He explains that many jobs previously irreplaceable are now being substituted by technology. Banerjee points out that market logic often favors automation and lower costs over maintaining higher salaries. In India and the US, labor markets can significantly differ in pay ratios. Elon Musk's $54 billion salary is cited as an extreme example of high executive compensation. But the speaker emphasizes that such large pay disparities are socially acceptable and problematic. Banerjee suggests that welfare states like China might handle unemployment differently, providing support for displaced workers. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the ethical implications of profit maximization. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the impact of technological advancements on workers. He questions the social costs and societal obligations when implementing such changes. The guest explains how people's lives can suddenly become unviable due to economic factors. But the guest emphasizes that treating people as machines is inappropriate because humans experience emotions like anger. Abhijit Banerjee discusses why India can be both economically large and poor. He explains that per capita income is crucial for understanding poverty levels. Banerjee clarifies that while India's economy has grown, poverty persists due to its large population. He addresses whether the country is getting richer or poorer, emphasizing income inequality. Banerjee provides an example of wealth disparity in India, noting the contrast between those who can afford expensive meals and those struggling to spend even a small amount. Banerjee shares his first-hand experience of rural Maharashtra's poor living conditions. Abhijit Banerjee notes things have improved vastly since his youth. He describes the poverty he witnessed in villages like Jharkhand, where people wore just a dhoti and gamkha. Banerjee mentions that while the rich have become richer, government revenue has increased due to GST. He explains that GST affects middle-class people more than the wealthy, allowing for greater redistribution of wealth. Abhijit Banerjee discusses how wages in construction have increased compared to before. He mentions interviewing construction workers in Delhi and Hyderabad the previous summer who earned between 500 and 350 rupees per day. Banerjee explains that a wage of just 50 rupees would not attract workers, indicating an overall increase in wages for unskilled laborers. He concludes that this change is due to policy and suggests that people are now earning more than they did 20 years ago. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the public distribution system (PDS) for the bottom 75% of India's economy, mentioning food subsidies as a means of survival. Banerjee clarifies that while living off PDS is not ideal, conditions have improved over time. He explains other factors like wealth and parental support affect results. Banerjee emphasizes the need for a controlled experiment to study computer effects on learning. He describes randomly selecting schools to ensure unbiased comparison. Banerjee outlines the process of giving computers to some schools and not others for a fair test. He explains why this method helps eliminate bias in comparing school performance. Banerjee concludes that such an experiment can determine if computers truly improve learning outcomes. Abhijit Banerjee explains the basic idea behind comparing outcomes in educational experiments. He emphasizes that naive comparisons can lead to biased results using an example of computers in schools. He uses the example of schools with computers to illustrate his point about underlying causal mechanisms in economics. Abhijit Banerjee discusses how pressure cookers became popular due to energy efficiency. He explains that Indian recipes specifically mention using a pressure cooker and the 3 whistles method. Banerjee highlights this as an example of market preferences influencing cooking styles unique to India. He notes the interaction between energy prices, poverty, and taste in the popularity of pressure cookers. Abhijit Banerjee explains the igmic cooker concept, noting its economic benefits for cooking. He discusses how energy-saving ideas have been around for over a century, mentioning the igmic cooker's origins in the 1930s. Banerjee clarifies that the term igmic is derived from economic principles and emphasizes its cost-saving nature. Banerjee critiques the tendency to judge the poor based on their consumption habits, suggesting a reverse perspective is more accurate. He explains why chips are popular, citing their ease of transport and availability even in remote areas. Banerjee contrasts chips with barfi, noting that the latter is more expensive due to its fragility and poor transportability. Abhijit Banerjee explains why poor people prefer chips over traditional meals. He states his view against criticizing poor people for their choices, emphasizing their difficult lives. Banerjee discusses how chips and samosas serve as a form of indulgence for the poor. He compares laddu and mithai to chips, noting their higher cost and significance in rituals. Banerjee humorously explains why guava is considered pyara, dear due to its iron content. Abhijit Banerjee discusses how anemia significantly reduces productivity. He mentions that addressing anemia is a key economic issue, paralleling business press concerns. Banerjee uses guava as an example of a simple intervention due to its availability and palatability. He explains that promoting guava consumption is easier than implementing more complex solutions. Banerjee connects this to understanding and influencing human behavior in economic policies. He introduces the concept of a S-trap curve in relation to poverty. He describes how extreme poverty leads to constant tiredness and reduced income potential. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the economic reality of small shops in Indian slums. Banerjee illustrates the S-curve concept. Productivity increases rapidly as investment grows, making diverse offerings attractive to customers. But the return on capital increases sharply after a certain point. A well-stocked shop attracts more customers compared to a sparsely stocked one. Providing small amounts of money periodically does not significantly impact poverty, while a one-time substantial sum can make a difference. Abhijit Banerjee discusses an experiment conducted in Kenya. Participants received either monthly small amounts or a lump sum equivalent to 2 years of such payments. Abhijit Banerjee explains how lump sum payments create more businesses than smaller, longer-term grants. Banerjee notes that some villagers were promised a small amount for 12 years, but the lump sum was only for 2 years and still produced more businesses. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the results of various studies on giving money to people. Banerjee states that there is no evidence that such actions lead to laziness or harmful behaviors. He explains that the evidence consistently shows people work more, not less, when given free money. Banerjee mentions a study combining 140 different analyses showing recipients worked slightly more after receiving aid. Abhijit Banerjee explains why depression demotivates work. Abhijit Banerjee discusses a study tracking recipients of assets for 17 years. The participants were given assets in 2007 and showed significant improvement by 2024. He explains that people hope to improve their lives rather than immediately spending the money on leisure activities. Where Banerjee mentions a S-shaped curve suggesting gradual improvement in life opportunities for recipients of aid. Abhijit Banerjee discusses why poor people might choose a better future over immediate gratification. Banerjee addresses the question of whether freebies are ruining India's economy and politics, stating his personal view that they are not detrimental but still prevalent among all parties. He differentiates between legitimate residency programs in Monaco and questionable ones in St. Lucia or Grenada. Laughter follows Banerjee's comments on tax havens. Abhijit Banerjee discusses how countries like Monaco and Switzerland are improving compliance, while Abhijit Banerjee discusses tax implications for multinational companies operating in India. Abhijit Banerjee discusses the necessity of using global markets for key inputs. Banerjee states that while the size matters in global influence, true pride should focus on improving quality of life for citizens. Banerjee then shifts to contemporary India, where women often work long hours as cheap labor. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a like and subscribe.